Okay, let's get right into it. For a long, long time, the global military balance of power felt pretty stable. But right now, there's a new competition taking shape, and it's completely redefining the 21st century. We're talking about the established might of the United States military going up against the incredible rise of China. And this is so much more than just ships or soldiers. It's really a clash of industries, technology, and ambition. And you can really see that clash right here. On one side, you've got the raw, historic power of the American industrial base, the famous arsenal of democracy. And on the other, you see China's vision. It's sleek, it's modern, it's global, and it's moving at lightning speed. This tension, this contrast, that's the heart of the story we're going to unpack. And this rivalry didn't just pop up overnight. Not at all. What we're seeing today is actually the end result of almost 3 decades of very quiet, very focused strategic planning, especially on Beijing's part. It turns out one single event really lit the fuse for all of this, and we're going to get to exactly what that was. So let's start with the most basic question of all. Why? Why is this happening now? Because if you really want to understand the competition, you first have to get inside the motivations that are driving China's massive military expansion. Well, it really all boils down to this one incredibly powerful idea. According to China's own official documents, their entire national strategy is laser-focused on achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by the year 2049. And look, this isn't just some catchy slogan. It's a detailed blueprint to become the global leader, and having a world-class military is seen as absolutely non-negotiable to make that happen. And that military, it has a very specific to-do list: defend what Beijing calls its core interests. Now, what's so critical to understand here is that these are officially described as things they will not negotiate on. We're talking about keeping the Communist Party in control, powering economic growth, and, this is the big one, asserting sovereignty over places like Taiwan and the South China Sea. These aren't just policies. For the CCP, they're fundamental to their legitimacy to rule. Okay, so China knew they couldn't compete with the US head-to-head, not back then. So they got smart. They chose what's called an asymmetric strategy, finding a weakness and exploiting it. And the whole story of that strategy really starts with one of America's biggest symbols of power, the aircraft carrier, and a crisis that was a huge wake-up call for Beijing. So, rewind to 1996. There's a crisis brewing over Taiwan, and the US responds by sailing 2 full-carrier strike groups into the area. And China was completely powerless. They had to face the humiliating fact that they couldn't even reliably find these giant symbols of American power, let alone do anything about them. That single moment kicked off a nearly 30-year obsession to make sure that never, ever happened again. And that obsession led them straight to developing what we now call the carrier killer missiles. This simple quote, it just perfectly captures the lesson China learned that day. It was never just about building a bigger missile. It was about building an entire system to find the target in the first place, right? The most powerful weapon in the world is useless if you have no idea where to aim it. This became the bedrock of their whole naval strategy. So what they built is what military folks call a kill chain. Think of it as a network. First up, they use satellites and special long-range radar to get an initial ping to detect the carrier. Then a whole bunch of other assets, drones, ships, you name it, start to track it constantly. All that data gets fused together and shot over to the missile launch units. And only then do they fire something like the DF-21D. It's this incredibly complex, integrated system with just one job. All right, so that brings us to today. How do these 2 military titans actually stack up against one another right now? Well, the numbers tell a really fascinating and honestly a pretty complicated story. And when you zoom in on their navies, you immediately see the core dynamic of this whole competition. It's a classic matchup, quantity versus quality. On one hand, China has the overwhelming numbers. On the other, the US still holds the edge when it comes to raw capability and projecting power across the globe. Just look at the raw ship count. By 2026, China's Navy is projected to have 841 ships. Compare that to America's 465. That is a huge numerical advantage, and it lets them dominate the waters right off their own coast. But then you see this. The United States operates 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers. China has 3. And this just perfectly illustrates that quality argument. A single American carrier strike group is, you could argue, the most powerful concentration of military force in human history, able to project air power literally anywhere on Earth. Of course, all of this hardware is fueled by money. And if you just look at the official numbers, the spending gap looks absolutely enormous. The US defense budget is nearly $1 trillion. It just dwarfs China's public number. But that's not the full picture. See, this is the crucial part. It's all about how you measure it. When analysts adjust for something called purchasing power parity, which is basically just a fancy way of asking, how much stuff can you actually buy with that money locally, the picture changes a lot. Because things like labor and materials are cheaper in China, their $235 billion has the real-world buying power of almost $500 billion. Now, the gap is still there, for sure, but it's way, way smaller than those official numbers make it seem. And this leads us to what might be the most critical and honestly the most overlooked part of this entire competition, the industrial base. I mean, the ships and the planes are the flashy end product, but the real, true foundation of military power is your ability to build them, to fix them, and to ramp up production in a hurry. And according to a major report from CSIS, this is the reality of the situation. The U.S. defense industry is still, for the most part, set up for peacetime. It's built for efficiency. China, on the other hand, has structured its defense industry for pure speed and volume, putting it on what experts are now calling a wartime footing. And if you want just one number, one single number to understand the mind-blowing scale of that difference, here it is. China's shipbuilding capacity is estimated to be more than 230 times larger than that of the United States. No, that is not a typo. It is a staggering industrial fact. And it gets even more specific. The U.S. Navy itself estimates that just one of China's big shipyards has more capacity than all U.S. shipyards put together. And this incredible pace isn't just for ships. Some government estimates say China is fielding new high-end weapon systems 5 to 6 times faster than the U.S. is. Now, the U.S. isn't just standing still, of course. There is a huge push going on to reboot that arsenal of democracy for a new century. We're seeing nimble startups getting big contracts, a huge investment in new tech like 3D printing to make spare parts on the fly, and using software to make the whole manufacturing process way faster and more flexible. The innovation race is definitely on.
Which really brings us to the final and most important question of all. In this new era of competition, what is the true measure of power? Is it the total number of ships you can float? Is it the untouchable tech of your aircraft carriers? Or is it the raw, brute force industrial capacity to build and rebuild when it matters most? The answer to that question is probably going to define who comes out on top for the rest of this century.